Growing up, I was that child, the active one, the one who was always curious. If there was a need for a question, I always asked. If there was an idea, I never hesitated. I was free with my voice. And at interval came in the corrections. Why do you always talk too much? Why is your mouth always running like water? Why can't you just be quiet? And then came in the comparison. Look at this girl. See how calm she is. Why can't you just be like her? And then you begin to notice that the quiet ones were always being praised. She's quiet, she's calm. And then you are the talk too much. The one who is doing too much and the one who needed to be reduced. And at that age, even without being conscious of it, something is being formed. And I believe a lot of us have experienced it in one way or another, in our homes, in our schools, and even in everyday interactions, where the quiet ones are being praised. This one is respectful. And the outspoken ones are always referred to as too loud or disrespectful. Beyond direct corrections, there are also things we learned while growing up in a cultural setting, like a place in Nigeria. You sit in a room where conversations are ongoing, and you have something to say, but then you remember you don't talk when an elder is talking, and then you keep quiet. Or you notice something important, but then you can't correct an elder, and so you hold it in. Sometimes it even shows up in simple moments. You see an older person on the road, and then you say, "Good morning, ma, how are you?" And then you first of all get this awkward silence, and then followed by a change in atmosphere, and you're wondering, did I say something wrong? And it's all because you asked an older person, "How are you?" And over time, we realized that we did not just learn respect. We were taught what it should look like. Not fully explained, but always corrected, reinforced, and repeated. And most times it ends like that. Don't do this, don't say this. Hardly do we ever hear, this is how to express yourself well. This is how your voice can still matter and can still honor others. And then what happens? A child who was once expressive suddenly become reduced. Not because they do not have what to say, but because they are trying to become what respect has been presented to them as. Many years later, I find myself in another environment as a teenager, this time around in a fashion design school. And I was no longer that active child. I had become a quiet girl. I could no longer speak up. I could no longer express myself. And this time I got the compliments. "Ah, Mercy, I like you so much. You're so calm. You don't have any problem at all." And I won't lie, those compliments sounded like success. But something was also happening in that space. I was the most overlooked, the most underrated, the most disrespected. And sadly, I couldn't even defend myself. Not because I did not have what to say, but because I wanted to be respectful. And then I began to imagine, I'm now calm. I'm now quiet. I'm now respectful. But why am I still suffering? I thought this was the right way. And then in that moment, I learned something important. That sometimes what we praise as quietness is not always confidence. It's not always wisdom. And it's not always respect. Sometimes it is fear. Sometimes it is suppression. Sometimes it is the voice of someone who has been made to believe that their voice is safer when hidden. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being quiet. There are people who are calm and quiet, and that's beautiful. But there's a difference between being quiet by nature, and being quiet because you have been reduced. One is personality, while the other is a consequence. But the problem is we label the both as the same: respect. And so someone who cannot express himself, cannot even speak up for himself, is praised. Not because they are thriving, but because they fit into what we have defined as respect. And so at that moment, I said to myself, if this is what respect looks like, then something is missing. Now, 5 years later, I'm in another environment, this time around, in school, and as a student leader. And at this point, I have grown. I understood gaps. I speak up and I advocate for students. And then I see a gap in student welfare. I go to meet an authority. And then the response I get is, "You, this girl, why are you the only one always coming here? Are you the only student in this school?" And then at first I think, maybe it's how I said it. I go back, I adjust, I redefine, and I come back again to meet the biggest response of my life. "Look at me very well. I am a father, and I have older children that are even older than you. And from where I come from, children do not tell older people what to do." And at that point, I'm wondering, so this is not about communication, not alone. This is about an illusionary mindset of respect. A mindset where young people should not say too much, where authority should not be questioned, and where expression be carefully reduced. A mindset where silence feels safer than contribution. And then I began to see all of these. And then one question comes up. Why do we have to shrink for others to feel respected enough? And this becomes even more sensitive for the girl child, where you grow up in a place with different cultures, like Nigeria, where respect is supposed to form behavior, but this time begins to form identity. It's now about how you stand, how you sit. You dare not sit in a room and cross your legs in a room full of older people. You dare not look directly at the eyes of people when you're being corrected. It's now about how you said it. And even confidence can be mistaken as being rude. And this begins to build walls. When questions are asked, "Don't you know you are just a woman?" And then it begins to build this setback. And you see capable, intelligent, and beautiful women positioned behind as assistants this, assistants that, always close to leadership, but never getting into it. And at the other extreme end, a lot of girls are not positioned in places where they can grow. Respect to those girls means them throwing away their future. Like a story of a father who was asked recently of the whereabouts of his daughter. And he said, "Don't ask me about that girl, I've disowned her." Why? Because she left home to pursue an education. So respect for that father was for the girl to be at home and respect him and not go to school. There's a quote by Martin Luther Jr. "Our lives begin to end the moment we become silent about things that matters to us." And I believe a lot of us here have become silent. And silence is no longer just behavior. Silence has become an identity. Until we leave home, we go into the outer space, into classrooms, into organizations, into workplaces. And we sit in rooms where things are not working. We see the gaps, we even have the ideas. But then we adjust ourselves, not because we do not have what to say, but because along the line we have learned that speaking up can be misunderstood. And so I began to reminisce on all these events. And I began to ask, what if we were not giving the full picture? What if we were giving the half picture of respect? What if there's a new dimension of respect? A dimension where respect is not silence. Respect is not fear. It is not suppression. A dimension where your voice is not a threat, but contribution. Where asking questions is not disrespect, but engagement. Where being bold is not rebellion, but awareness. Because systems cannot benefit from ideas that are afraid to be spoken. And every system, your home, your school, rise or falls by the voices that are within it. Now let me be clear. A responsible voice is not noise. It is not reckless. A responsible voice always asks, can this be better? How can this be done? So the next time you find yourself in a room where things are not working, don't just ask, should I be quiet? Ask instead, what dimension of respect am I walking in? Because your voice is not disrespect, your voice is responsibility. Thank you.